Welcome to tonight's Tales of Terror. These are stories whispered in the dark, events that have left their mark on those unfortunate enough to experience them. Turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and prepare yourself for 4 chilling encounters that will haunt your thoughts long after this night ends. Each story will pull you deeper into the shadows, into the fear that lingers just beyond the edges of what you can see. Keep your senses sharp and your courage close, for what you hear tonight may follow you long after the last word has been spoken. Story 1. The Midnight Hitchhiker. It was a rainy night when Mark drove down the empty highway. The rain had been falling steadily for hours, turning the asphalt into a slick, reflective ribbon that stretched endlessly into darkness. The windshield wipers worked furiously, yet the drops came faster than they could clear, smearing the road into streaks of light and shadow. Every few seconds, the tires hissed on the wet surface, a rhythmic accompaniment to the persistent drumming of the rain on the car roof. Mark had been driving for nearly 3 hours straight. The monotony of the road, the darkness, and the endless hum of the tires had made his eyes heavy. He tried to stay alert, gripping the steering wheel tightly, but the isolation was oppressive. The streetlights had long since vanished behind him, leaving only the dim beam of his headlights cutting through the fog. Then he saw her. She stood on the roadside, drenched in rain, hair plastered to her pale, almost translucent face. Her clothes clung to her body like a second skin. She looked small, fragile, and lost. Something about her made Mark shiver. He slowed the car instinctively, unsure why his gut twisted with unease. He pulled over and called, "Do you need a ride?" She stepped forward without a word, opening the passenger door and sliding in. Water dripped from her hair and coat onto the floor mat. Mark swallowed hard. There was something unnatural about her presence. It was heavy, almost suffocating, like a cold wind trapped inside the car with him. Her eyes never moved from the road ahead, but Mark felt her gaze piercing into his mind, cold and unrelenting. The rain pounded the roof, the wipers squeaking back and forth, a rhythm that somehow amplified the silence between them. "Where are you headed?" he finally asked. No answer. Minutes passed. Mark tried again. "Are you cold? Do you need a blanket?" Nothing. Just that unblinking stare. Then, a whisper. So faint, he could barely hear it over the rain. "You shouldn't have looked." Mark froze. His stomach turned to ice. "Looked where?" he asked, though dread had already rooted itself deep in his chest. He glanced at the back seat. It was empty. His heart lurched. The seatbelt hung loosely, but no sign of her. Panic surged through him. He spun to look at her. She was still there, smiling, her expression unnerving and impossible, a smile that felt like it had been carved into her face. "You shouldn't have looked," she repeated, voice soft but chilling. Mark slammed the brakes. Tires hissed and skidded on the wet asphalt. The car rocked slightly. When he dared glance at the rearview mirror, she was there, in the back seat, closer than he had ever imagined. The next few miles passed in a blur. Mark's hands shook violently on the wheel. The rain fell harder, pounding the roof, drumming against his ears. His reflection in the rearview mirror began to distort. His own eyes stared back, wide with fear, but the face behind them was twisted, smiling, mirroring the woman's cold grin. Time lost all meaning. Hours seemed like seconds, seconds stretched into eternity. The highway around him bent and twisted, the familiar road now a strange, endless labyrinth. Trees leaned unnaturally, shadows danced at impossible angles. The whispers began again. "You shouldn't have looked. You shouldn't have looked. You shouldn't have looked." Mark's mind struggled to hold on to reason. Every instinct screamed to stop, to escape, but his car moved as if on autopilot, pulled forward by some invisible force. The figure in the back seat seemed to grow, her smile widening, eyes dark and knowing, feeding on his fear. By dawn, the road finally straightened. The first light of morning broke through the clouds, softening the horror that had surrounded him. The highway appeared calm, empty, normal. The woman was gone. Except for one thing. A single wet shoe lay in the middle of the road, one small, pale shoe glistening in the morning light. Mark never drove that highway again. He never looked at rain the same way, and every time he heard the wind whisper through the trees, he swore he heard her voice again, cold and soft, repeating the words that would haunt him forever. You shouldn't have looked. Story 2. The Locked Window. Ginny had moved into an old apartment, seeking a fresh start. The building was charming in a faded, neglected way, filled with creaking floors and drafty hallways. The apartment itself was modest, with peeling paint, a slightly musty smell, and a large, single bedroom with one window in the corner that refused to open. At first, she thought nothing of it. Old windows often got stuck. But the first night, she heard scratching. Soft at first, like a cat tapping against the glass. She ignored it. Then came the whisper. "Let me in." She froze, convinced it was just the wind. But the scratching continued, growing louder, more insistent, accompanied by soft knocks, almost like fingernails scraping the glass. Her heart raced, pulse hammering in her ears. The next night, the whisper was clearer. "Please, open the window." Jenny tried to convince herself it was imagination, but the sense of presence was undeniable. Something, or someone, was waiting outside, watching, patient and relentless. The third night, she awoke to the sound of pounding against the glass. Her breath came in shallow, terrified gasps. She approached the window slowly. The frame was icy to the touch, trembling under invisible pressure. She tried to open it. Locked. The pounding continued. The whispers grew louder. "Let me in! Let me in!" Desperate, she called the landlord. He arrived quickly, a tall, calm man, and unlocked the window with ease. Jenny exhaled, trembling, but her relief turned to horror. Pressed against the inside of the glass was a pale handprint, perfectly shaped, as if someone had been trapped there. Inside. Jenny never stayed another night in that apartment. She left, belongings scattered, heart racing. Even years later, the sound of scratching or tapping on glass would make her flinch, her mind conjuring the cold, pale hand pressed against the window, waiting. Story 3. The Phone Call from the Past. Tom was a collector of old technology. He loved the hum of typewriters, the weight of vintage cameras, and particularly the rotary phones. One day, at a thrift store, he discovered an old, dusty phone, cracked but otherwise intact. It called to him. He brought it home and placed it on a table in his living room. That night, at exactly 3:03 a.m., the phone rang. Startled, Tom picked it up. "Hello?" A trembling, almost imperceptible voice whispered, "Don't look behind you." Tom laughed nervously. "Okay, very funny." But the calls continued. Every night at 3:03, the phone would ring. The voice grew older, clearer, angrier with each passing night. Sometimes it repeated its warning, "Don't turn around." Other times, it whispered his name, slowly, deliberately, elongating each syllable until it sounded like a curse. On the fourth night, Tom waited. His hands shook as he lifted the receiver. "Who is this?" he demanded. Silence. Then, faintly, the same chilling whisper, "You shouldn't have looked." Compelled against his will, Tom turned. A shadowy figure stood in the corner of his apartment, its face, his face, identical yet twisted with malice. He dropped the phone. It rang anyway. Tom left his apartment. He destroyed the phone. But at 3:03 a.m. every night the calls continued. Always the same voice, always the same warning, and always the same shadow, waiting. Story 4. The Mirror in the Woods. Lila had always loved the forest. There was something about the quiet, the way the trees whispered in the wind, the scent of damp earth and moss that made her feel alive. She preferred camping far from civilization, where the noises of cars and phones couldn't reach her. Tonight, the air was thick with the smell of rain-soaked soil, and mist curled between the trees like thin fingers. She wandered farther than she had intended, The trail she had been following vanished into a tangle of undergrowth and roots. Shadows stretched in the dim light, twisting and turning in ways that made her second guess where she had stepped. Every sound, the snapping of a twig, the rustle of leaves, felt amplified, like the forest itself was listening. Then she saw it, an old, ornate mirror, leaning against a tree as though deliberately placed. Its frame was carved with strange symbols, worn and darkened by age. Curious, she approached. The mirror's glass reflected the fading light, fogged slightly with moisture, but something about it felt alive. She looked into it. At first, it was just her reflection, but slowly she realized something was off. Her reflection didn't move when she did. It stayed still, its eyes locked on hers, and a slow, deliberate smile spread across its face. Her heart pounded. Lila stepped back. The forest seemed to grow quieter, as if holding its breath. The mist thickened around her feet, wrapping her ankles in cold, damp tendrils. She turned to leave, but the path she had taken seemed to vanish, swallowed by the fog. The trees loomed closer, their branches like skeletal fingers. A whisper reached her ears, soft at first, almost like the wind through the leaves. "Lila, Lila." It was drawn out, deliberate, sending shivers down her spine. She spun, searching for the source. No one was there. Only the mirror remained, gleaming faintly in the dim light. She forced herself to take a step back. The reflection in the mirror shifted. It raised a hand, beckoning her closer. Lila shook her head, muttering to herself that it was impossible, that this was just her imagination. But the air grew colder, heavier, almost suffocating, pressing down on her chest. For hours, or perhaps only minutes, she wandered through the forest, every path seemingly twisting back on itself. The mirror remained in sight, no matter which direction she turned. Its reflection now mimicked her movements, but with subtle distortions. Her smile too wide, her eyes too dark, her posture slightly unnatural. She felt drawn to it, unable to resist the pull. As night fell fully, the forest transformed. Shadows deepened, shapes moved in the corners of her vision. She swore she could hear whispers, indistinct voices calling her name, urging her toward the mirror. Her footsteps quickened. She tried to run, but the ground shifted beneath her. Roots twisted like serpents, tripping her, slowing her escape. Every attempt to flee led her back to the mirror. The reflection began to speak. Not words exactly, but feelings, fears, memories, desires, flooding her mind in a torrent of confusion and terror. She saw glimpses of herself twisted and trapped, screaming silently. The mirror became a window, a portal, and she understood with mounting horror that it wanted her. It wanted to replace her. Lila tried to destroy it. She grabbed a nearby branch, striking the glass. It didn't shatter. Instead, it rippled like water, distorting her face into grotesque shapes. The whispers grew louder, insistent, mocking. The reflection smiled wider, stepping closer, though it remained within the mirror. Her panic escalated. She ran blindly through the forest, branches tearing at her skin, mud sucking at her boots. Every sound seemed magnified, her ragged breathing, the snapping twigs, the soft thud of unseen footsteps behind her. She dared not look back, though part of her feared she would anyway. Hours passed, or was it minutes? Time had lost meaning. Hunger, fatigue, fear, they blended together, a blur of desperation. And always, just ahead, the mirror waited. Occasionally she glimpsed it through the mist, the glass gleaming faintly, the reflection of herself grinning, beckoning, taunting. At one point she collapsed near a tree, trying to catch her breath. The whispers surrounded her now, inescapable. They spoke her deepest fears, her regrets, every insecurity amplified 100-fold. Lila shivered violently, realizing she might never leave this forest alive, or sane. A sudden thought struck her. She could not fight it. She could not run. The mirror had drawn her in too deeply. Desperation fueled her next action. She forced herself to stare into the glass. The reflection stared back, eyes hollow, smiling. And then, it blinked. Something uncoiled in her stomach. The reflection began to step forward, slow, deliberate. Its movements mirrored her terror perfectly. Lila screamed, trying to break the trance, but her limbs refused to obey. She stumbled forward, toward the mirror, against her will. Then a final moment of clarity hit her. The reflection was not just an image, it was a trap, a prison for those who dared look too long. She leapt backward, smashing the frame against a tree. The mirror shivered, but did not break. The whispers became screams. Shadows in the forest twisted violently, circling her. She ran blindly, branches scratching her face, roots tripping her at every step. The mirror remained, always just beyond her reach. Eventually, dawn broke. Faint light pierced the mist. The forest seemed to relax, the shadows retreating, the whispers fading. Lila collapsed near a stream, gasping, bruised, terrified, but alive. She looked around. The mirror was gone, vanished, no trace. Weeks later, hikers discovered an identical mirror in a different part of the forest. In its glass, a girl could be seen, waving silently, eyes wide with fear. The girl in the reflection was not among the hikers. Lila knew instantly who it was. She shivered, knowing the forest had claimed her, leaving her alive only to carry the memory. The mirror waits, always. And for those who wander too far, who stare too long, it will take them next. These were 4 stories of terror, each crossing the line between reality and nightmare. Which one haunted you most? Remember, some things are better left unseen, some voices better left unheard, and some reflections are never meant to be watched. Sleep well, if you can.